So I should do introductions. My name is Ellis Pratt from Cherryleaf, and I've got with me Brian Harris from Redgate, who heads up the documentation team. I don't know your proper title. Is it documentation manager?
It's not. We've just recently changed the name of the role actually. So I was head of technical communications, and I'm now head of the technical writers or the head of technical writing. So we're now technical writers, not technical authors or technical communicators.
Right. Oh, okay. So Redgate, can you tell me a little bit about Redgate, what they do, where they're based? Questions
Sure.
like that.
So Redgate is a small to medium-sized software company based in Cambridge, and it's been around for 15 years, in fact, and we employ about 300 people. Probably about half of those are software developers, and we make useful tools of various kinds for software developers, primarily database developers. So our flagship product is a tool that compares to databases and says how they differ and automates that process. This is something that in the past a lot of database administrators or database developers would do manually, and we have tools that speed things up. We also have things like profilers and monitoring tools, a few things for Oracle, that kind of stuff. But generally our users are probably also working in software organizations of some kind or in software roles.
And before we started the interview, you were showing me your sweatshirt. And in terms of how long Redgate's been in business, it's what it's on the T-shirt, isn't it?
It is. It's 15 years of fame, I think it says here. So we do celebrate our birthday every year. It's one of the nice things about Redgate is we do make a big fuss of every year we get a bit older. So we are now officially a grumpy teenager, 15. So obviously it was a small company for a number of years. I joined about 7.5 years ago when there were about 60 people, and it's grown in size since then. So it's quite fun. We have an American office, but they don't do development. It's a sales office primarily, and we have a very small office in Indonesia. But everything good happens in Cambridge, including all of the technical writers.
And do you think being in Cambridge has an impact, or gives it a particular affects its identity in any way?
Yeah, we are very much a Cambridge company. It's not coincidental. There's a big computer science department at the university. A lot of our engineers have been at Cambridge. They are Cambridge graduates. We're based here because our founder was at Cambridge, but we also hire a lot of people straight out of Cambridge University. And also there's a very thriving software scene here as well. So Silicon Fen is the nickname of Cambridge, and there are a number of companies who are all in a similar field. So having been here longer than I care to admit, after a while you do get to know a few people there. So it's a good place for networking. I moved to Cambridge to work for a company called I2, who got bought by IBM, and after a while you start to know people who know people who know people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of good networking things happening in Cambridge, so it's definitely a good place to be based.
Yeah, nice quality of life in Cambridge.
Definitely.
So I think you said there were 240 employees now in Cambridge, in Cambridge, in Redgate.
There's about between about 280 at the moment, I think.
280.
It's higher than 300, but depends who you count, because sometimes we sort of host small companies. We're like an incubator for small companies. So there are certain people who we see around. We're not quite sure who they are or what they do, but it's quite nice. We get a real mix of people. A couple of the guys that were based in our offices later went on to work for LinkedIn, and that was a fairly big money move. I think they've done okay for themselves. So they're based in San Francisco now. But over the years, we've had a number of different small companies sort of work for us. Some of them we've acquired. Some of them they're just using our office space. But so it's hard to say how many people exactly, but it's about 280.
So I think one of the founders retired or moved on last year. Is it?
Is
there still a connection with the founders? How the ownership of Redgate is privately owned?
It is privately owned, and it's still owned by primarily by Neil and Simon, our two founders. Neil took a backseat. He doesn't work at Redgate anymore, and he actually left to go and do an art history degree.
Oh, okay.
So he's obviously a lot more cultured than the rest of us. So I think the interesting thing about any small business that is set up by entrepreneurs is that the fun you get from starting something from nothing is very different from running a medium-sized company and having to be responsible for hundreds of people, different divisions, and all the functions, sales and marketing, and HR. So I think for Neil that wasn't where his interests lay, and he always wanted to go and do something a bit more sort of enlightening. So Simon is still here, and he still very much is a hands-on CEO. He's a great guy. He sits in the office with the rest of us. He has queues up for lunch with everyone else. It's very much a company that is still in his image, really. It's still a fun, laid-back kind of very positive, liberal kind of place to work.
Yeah, so
as a lot of software companies are, to be honest.
Yeah, it's very much, from my knowledge of Redgate, it's very much a jeans and t-shirt organisation.
Yeah.
So
if anyone's wearing a suit, they're either up before the magistrate or they've got an interview somewhere. So.
This jacket's primarily because where I am is rather cold, rather than anything else. So your role within the organisation and Redgate's and how Redgate tackles technical documentation. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined, I was the third technical writer they had at the time, and they were already doing a slightly different kind of role from what I'd been used to in my previous job. And by that, what I meant was that the two authors were working embedded in software development teams and actually sort of collaborating closely with the other members of that team, the developers and the testers. And that we've basically taken that and made that the absolutely sort of central pillar of what we want technical writers to do here. So we're doing a lot of interviewing at the moment because we're recruiting, and we always have an interesting discussion with our applicants about what it is they think they will be doing, what their expectations are for the job. And particularly, they focus a lot on the writing, so they imagine that a technical writer's job is very much to spend a lot of time writing. And we really steer them away from that, because for us, what we want from our technical writers is somebody that can participate in a software development project and work alongside other people with different skills, some testers and user experience specialists, designers, coders, but actually we really want to see those people as one team who collectively and collaboratively can produce software. So what we say is, you need to be able to work on that team. We want you to be embedded, integrated in the team, and also very much, it's your take ownership of everything to do with, the wording, the languages used, and so on. And we don't particularly say your job is to write a user manual or write a lot of help pages, because actually we foreground the product itself. If the product is well designed, and that includes user experience, should include all of the microcopy, the names of labels, the options of terminology. If we get somebody to do that, then we're really in a better position than if we'd said wait till the software's complete, throw it over the fence, and then you can write a user manual, which is where I started. And I think a lot of more traditional authors, they're more used to that way of working. So it's fun in that respect, but the role we have to explain to people, we have to be very careful about the people we want. We look for social interaction skills as much as good comm skills as much as the ability to write well, which obviously we need, but it's a real mix of skills we're looking for.
So within Redgate, the technical writers own, or technical authors own, all of the words that appear in the software outside of marketing copy, if I remember correctly.
That's right, yes, and we're at a point now where that's expected. That is an understood way of how Redgate develops its software. So if a team are working on, say, new user interface, they will demand input from a technical writer. Not every team has a full-time technical writer, because they may be at an early stage, or we may not have enough people to go around. But what's great now is that there's that expectation that this needs technical a technical writer's eyes on it. This needs some help from a technical writer. So we've trained the rest of our developers, I think, to work with technical writers, because obviously not many of them have been used to working in this way before. In fact, some of them have probably never seen a user experience specialist, or haven't worked with anyone other than developers before. So it's good for us, because it means that we get to input into the product from a very early stage, really.
Excuse me. So Redgate uses Agile and uses Lean. Does that have an effect on how the documentation side is carried out within these software projects?
Yes, it does. I mean, it's actually quite difficult to fit in a sort of a documentation plan, a more traditional set of tasks for an author within an agile sort of development cycle. So essentially, what we expect is that the technical writer always sort of has, is always wearing two hats. One is, what features are being developed in this sprint? What are we working on at the moment, and how can I help? What do I need to help develop that feature? So it may be, I need to help with the designs. I need to come up with the names of the functions and so on. I need to look at the microcopy embedded assistance. So help deliver the current sprints feature. At the same time, we always have to think of a slightly longer term, as in what other supporting materials do users need. So we use, as you know, Confluence as our main public-facing wiki. Yeah. So there's always a side where we need to keep that sort of relevant and topical and useful as well. So the team themselves don't really get that involved with the sort of Confluence side. We use them for reviews, and they can, maybe write the odd release note. But so the technical writer is always looking at two slightly different timescales.
So how many technical writers do you have at Redgate now?
We have 6, including myself. And
that's one of the ways in as a graduate, isn't it, into Redgate?
Yes. We've got a mix of, I think, 3 or 4 of our authors came in as graduates. In fact, it's more common for us to hire graduates. And those graduates come from a range of backgrounds, but often they'll have arts degrees, so we often hire people from the humanities background. But we look for somebody with a real, aptitude for technical information. So one of our authors had done a bit of coding on the side, and was quite happy with that world. And the reason we like graduates is that they're a blank slate, so they don't come with a lot of sort of history about how they think technical writing should work, and expect to write a hefty tome or a big user manual. We can train them in doing the job that we want to do. So we've had fairly good hit rate hiring graduates to do that job, really.
So if you're a company, you want to take on graduates, what advantage does it give you by starting them off in the technical writing, technical authoring world? Is it that it fulfills a resourcing need, or is there something extra it gives them in terms of getting into the company?
I think the main benefit is it's a fun job, and it's really interesting and challenging. So just being a technical writer is a really fun role to have. Partly because it's not particularly well defined. So every day is you're on the team. You're basically figuring out yourself what the most valuable thing you can do is at any given point. But we have seen in the past that technical authors have, myself included, have gone on to things like project management. And I think project management and marketing, so one of our previous authors has actually become a product manager. Right. So I was a project manager for a while. I think what we've seen is that the nature of the role of technical writer lends itself quite well to project management, because in a way you have to take an overview, you have to learn everything about the project, you have to be able to interact with other people, you have to get the information you need. And when you come to manage things like releases, where you're responsible for making sure all of the documentation is up to date, often the author is sometimes the person that can be sort of overseeing that process. So it's almost a natural springboard to being a project manager.
Yeah, the extra bit is the people management skills, and I guess the project management skills over and above that. In terms of the content and the outputs that you produce, and who reads the documentation, can you tell me a bit about what's created and
Sure.
formats and that type of thing?
So we almost have a sort of saying in Reggae, which is no one reads the help. And I think we're of the view that we shouldn't expect our users to have to read a lot of sort of traditional kind of help information to use our product. So as I said before, we certainly focus primarily on everything that's in the product. And I see it as a sort of hierarchy that if you name a command or a button properly in itself, that's useful. It's just like helpful for the user. You can then add sort of a sentence beneath some macro. You can add a widget. If that's not itself enough, you can link to a help page on our wiki site. But that's kind of in each time you're offering more information. Whereas ideally, the person is sort of breezing through the interface and just using the product. So ideally, we don't want people to notice what we output. We're not judged by page views or the amount of stuff we make that is read. We're actually judged by, do our products sell? Can people use them? Are they ingeniously simple? So we really try and focus our efforts on that. But we have really the only thing outside of the products that we actually deliver is our wiki site, and that's a set of things like prerequisites and installation process where needed, troubleshooting, and some sort of examples, maybe walkthroughs and so on. Because it's a sort of ideal that the product is inherently just usable without any supporting information. But I think it's naive to think that any product can be that simple. Even our most straightforward products benefit from some kind of supporting sort of help information.
It's an interesting trend, this move to embedded help. Citrix, I think there's still a battle over, or discussion over what it will be called. Citrix used the word information experience, and IBM used design-led documentation.
Yeah.
There is that content as design or part of design seems to be something that a number of companies are moving towards. And the content, is it behind a firewall?
It's entirely available publicly on anyone with an internet connection, and that was very liberating actually, because it's partly the nature of the tools we sell. We want somebody who Googles with maybe a question or a problem with one of our tools to be able to find that the information that we've made available, we've written ourselves. And as you know, these days, the first response from anyone who's stuck with anything is to Google it.
Yeah.
So if your documentation isn't available on the internet, chances are that isn't going to be a successful strategy for them as well. I mean, one of the interesting things is that we've had a lot of prototype products over the years, things that maybe didn't mature into successful products, but smallish. And often the dev teams will knock up a quick site, maybe some FAQs, and we're very relaxed about that. So there isn't a very strict sort of process for every product has to have this set of information. It's whatever works at the time.
Yeah.
So a kind of new experimental beta product might just have a page with a couple of questions on it. Maybe an author looked at it, maybe they did a quick edit. Then we'll think more about what to do. So it's whatever works really. Our more mature products have a page in Confluence, or a set of pages in Confluence.
And it's documentation.red-gate.com, if I remember.
That's correctly. Right. Yeah. Feel free to go and critique it. Certainly, we like people to come in and tell us how we can do things better. But there's not a huge amount of information. One of the reasons we chose Confluence, and you know this better than anyone because you helped us decide on using Confluence, was that we realised our requirements were fairly simple and straightforward. And we didn't have a particular demand for sort of security, as in that information was sensitive. We didn't write a lot. We just wanted to try and keep it. What we really wanted was the ability to write something, have it available to the public, almost instantly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the incredibly refreshing things about Confluence. It lacks certain things. It's not very good for versioning, and it's not a fully featured authoring solution. But if a user says, I've had this problem and an error message appeared and you need to write a quick troubleshooting, you can have that up and available in 2 minutes. I mean, it really is that quick. And that appealed to us because it's kind of, it fits how we work, really.
And it fits your audience as well, of mainly developers whose natural inclination will go to the web or a forum to find out information. So a typical day for you, or a typical day for a technical writer at Redgate, is there such a thing, or what types of, I mean, from somebody from the outside who doesn't know what technical authors do and how they spend their day. I mean, you said earlier that it's not about coming in at 9 o'clock and writing till 5 or 5:30. What's the type of things that would an author, a writer would get involved with in a typical day or typical week?
Sure. Because writers are attached to software development teams, well, not really attached to, a part of that team, there'll be a daily stand-up, which is one of the the Scrum artifacts. So the stand-up will be everyone stand by the whiteboard and talk about what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, and there'll be tasks on the board. And so one of the things that each writer will do today is look at what the tasks are that the development team are working on, and maybe generate some associated tasks themselves. So, I mean, actually, currently I'm working in that role because I'm filling in because we have a vacancy for somebody and we don't have anyone doing that. So, I mean, that's what I've been doing actually, was, chatting to the devs and saying, show me this new feature. Okay, you want an explanation in the command line version. You need an error message here, and I'll just stick those up and then work my way through them. So this is working very much on the ongoing daily sort of development cycle. But there's lots of other things as well. A team that maybe don't have an author may ask for, can we have a quick read over something they're writing? I spend time looking at people's emails. So one of the things that I'm pleased about is that we're now established as these are the people that are quite good at writing anything, pretty much. So we get people sending us, can you look over this email? Can you look over this white paper or any kind of written content? So we do a bit of that as well. If there's an event coming up, we may be asked to put together a handout, like something that a user can walk through. That's often run by like our marketing team or our events team. So we'll help out there as well. And it could be anything really. We could get an email in from a customer saying they spotted something on a page somewhere in our wiki site, and we'll go and sort of look at that as well. And for some authors, I keep saying authors, but we should call them technical writers now because we did change that name. They may be attached to a project that isn't currently under development. So one thing that we've learned is that you can't just throw a writer into a team for half an hour and say he or she's going to help you write this bit of the interface or write your error message. Ideally, we'll have writers attached to the team from the when they form, from the very beginning. And so one of the jobs we've got, we might be doing research, learning about the customers, the market, the tool. So if it's in that phase, there might be quite a lot of user tests to go on. So most of our writers will go to usability sessions and watch a user try out. It might not even be a real product. It could be a paper prototype or a very early working version, and take notes and see where the user struggles and so on.
So if you're developing a new piece of software, the author learns about the product by asking the developers or being given a system they can puzzle it out for themselves, or a mixture of
both. A bit of everything really. And we don't particularly say to our writers, this is how you learn about this particular product and this new version, this new feature. We sort of say your job is to find out what you need to know to be able to work on this new release. And we sort of trust them to be able to. We might, if they're new, give them some guidance as to the kinds of sources. But we have a support team. They generate lots of support requests. We have salespeople who talk to customers. We have site visits where we write up information. We have in-house usability tests. We have a lot of knowledge in our teams here. So we just partly one aspect of the job is to be able to be a good researcher and actually find the information that you need. It may not exist. That's the fun thing. It might be a product where we just don't really know quite what we're doing yet, and so it might be a case of experimentation. But we don't. We try really not to let them work autonomously as much as possible. All our writers.
Okay, and in terms of formal training and formal training before somebody becomes a technical writer at Redgate, and training they might get as part of the job. What sort of formal training do they get, and what types of background and skills do they have when they start at Redgate?
So their starting skills are well, hopefully they have very strong writing skills, and what we want to do is sort of help them learn how to adapt their style to write things like embedded help or microcopy or walkthroughs, step-by-step assistance, that kind of thing. So when a new author starts, they'll be on a 3-month probation, and as part of that, we'll set some very clear goals about by the end of this period, we'll have expected you to actually have done a whole bunch of different types of tasks. So often we'll be shadowing a more experienced writer for a while, and what we really want for new writers is to experience what it's like to work on a development team, so then they can pick up the sorts of things that happen. They can go to the meetings, they can go to the sprint reviews, and see the backlog in action, and look at the way the tasks work, and actually start to pick up those actual tasks. So it's sort of learning by doing. But we do a 2-day, or is it one or 2 day training course on user experience. A guy called David Travis comes in and will run a workshop on various aspects of user experience, including how to visit a customer and learn sort of useful information from their surroundings and their context, but also all of the principles of good design. So we do expect our writers to start either dabbling in design, and that could be a sort of an exercise that we run for a few weeks as a test, or it could be on the actual product itself, depending what they need. But so we like to see that they're picking up the design side as well, because some of our teams don't have a designer at all, and the technical writer can fill it. We really want writers that, in theory, can knock up a designer and user interface as well.
Right.
Yeah. So by the end of 3 months, they've hopefully got a range of those sorts of skills, but certainly practiced a lot of writing. And one thing we do, particularly for new hires, is we go through a fairly ruthless review process. So red penning, and this came from an author who was here when I joined, Heather, who you know quite well, Heather Fielding. And one thing that struck me, I thought I was a really competent writer at this point, and she returned my first attempt to write a help topic of some kind, and it was scrawled with red pen. And it's kind of it's a learning. It's definitely baptism by fire, but we still do that. We still keep that going because we really want all our writers to focus on the every single word, and there's no way of learning that without sort of regular reviews of that kind. So that's definitely one of the learning processes they go through.
Everyone can benefit from being edited. I think that's
exactly.
You have to live, accept that, and be happy with that. And it's a lot easier editing people's stuff than actually creating it from scratch. As well.
And especially when you're writing mostly inside an interface, you've obviously usually have fewer words to play with. You might be writing something that occupies a small. I mean, we don't do localization, so we don't have to worry about leaving space for, say, German, but we do operate in often I've got 3 sentences I can put in this pop-up help box. What should they be? And every single word matters. So it's an important process for new writers to learn that it has to be rigorous, and they have to iterate through their work a lot until it's as good as it can be.
Yeah.
And that's something that if you think you're writing a user guide, you just might not be in quite that same frame of mind.
Yes, it's writing it, going back, writing and improving it, going back, improving it again.
Yeah.
And one of the advantages of it being online is you can change it, and there's not too much of an issue of actually implementing those changes. Whereas if your content's on paper, then it's harder to do frequent changes.
We certainly have that luxury. I mean, with our wiki site, if somebody spots, say, a typo, we do make them. We're not perfect. Yeah. We can change that and publish it in a matter of seconds. So it's one of the many benefits of using Confluence. But so attention to detail is very important for us. So when we hire new writers, we do scrutinise their CV and their covering letter, because if it's somebody that clearly hasn't quite given it that kind of rigorous review process,
Yeah.
it means that we maybe don't quite have the confidence that they're going to apply themselves in that way to the role. So that's just a tip for anyone applying for a writing job. If you're applying for a job as technical writer, don't submit a CV or cover letter that has mistakes in it.
Attention to detail.
You're advertising your own work then. So,
yeah. So you mentioned tools, and the authoring tool that you use is Confluence, which is a web-based, wiki-like authoring tool. Are there other tools that you use, say, for screencasting, and are there any methodologies or methods, writing methods or standards that you use as well, or in addition to those?
We don't really do a lot of video, actually. It's something we might look to do a bit more of, and often we have quite a big marketing department, and often the videos for products are generally produced by them, and some of them are quite technical as well. So at the moment, that's not something that the writers necessarily produce. We have a few here and there. We do have a style guide, actually, which one of our writers is, his main hobby is editing Wikipedia pages, and he's very, very hot on style. Like he will essentially red pen everything that everyone writes the whole time, because he's got that level of detail. So we do have a style guide. We're not particularly rigorous about enforcing it everywhere.
By style, you're meaning tone and voice rather than look and feel, or
a little bit. It's mostly specifics, as in don't use this phrase, or use contractions, or it's like a sort of Guardian style guide type of document that just goes from A to Z and sort of says what our preferred term is. I guess the tone and the style, it tends to come out through that review process, so that when somebody's been there long enough, they've been through that red penning exercise enough to sort of know, we prefer active voice, and that being concise is sort of our golden rule. So hopefully they'll pick that up. Without the style guide can help a little bit, but it doesn't really sort of make sure that they're writing quite in that way. But we're not a place for a lot of standards and rules like that. Often because we're very much focused on, we want to get something in front of users first.
Yeah.
So we kind of, as I said, it's do what works, do what's needed, rather than sort of make sure you apply all of the existing styles. But I should point out, we're probably not necessarily a typical organisation, or if you're working somewhere, a much larger software organisation, if you're working at ARM, say, they probably have quite rigorous standards for how they deliver their guides to chip design, because that's important. It's just not something that is the number one thing for us, really.
Yeah. And in terms of these videos that I'm doing are for the professional body in the UK, the ISTC, the Institute of Scientific and Technical Communicators. Are members of are some of the technical writers in Redgate members of the ISTC? And what do you see value in professional bodies such as that?
We've not particularly been a company for professional bodies to this point. I honestly don't know if they're members of the ISTC.
Well, Roger was, wasn't he? But he's moved on to a different department now.
Yeah. I mean, I think partly one of the things is because when we go to conferences and talk to the members of the community, we didn't find a lot of other writers out there that were doing quite the same role. So in that respect, we felt a bit like we were looking elsewhere actually for a while to we can learn from other kinds of companies. So I went to Atlassian Summit this year, and that was really interesting to talk to their technical writers as well. Whereas some of the conferences, it's interesting because it covers a broad range of technical writing, but particularly for Redgate and what technical writers do here, most of that is not stuff that we don't do localization, we don't write user guides, we don't produce a lot of written content. We don't do any single sourcing, we don't use DITA, we don't have structured authoring. It's like the list of things we don't do is often reads like an agenda for a conference. So for that reason, sometimes we think we're not getting that much out of it.
Yeah.
But we have presented at the conferences before. So, I don't want to disparage other authors. It's just that the kinds of authoring that we do here and the kinds of people we have are quite niche almost, I think, in some ways, because we're very much about the software.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is probably no, we're not particularly engaged with the ISTC. But having said that, for new writers, I think we should make them aware of its existence and try and encourage them to join up, because it's clearly a useful thing to have a body like that. Yeah,
there are advantages. You've got effectively what you're doing internally within Redgate is mentoring new authors. One of the advantages of a professional body is you can get that mentoring. It can be from spheres outside of your own company. If you're a sole author on your own, then there may be no one that you can talk to do things.
That's also true, yeah.
I think we're at a stage where there are a number of companies following a similar path to you, but aren't necessarily going public with it, or hasn't come to a point where lots of people are talking about it. But I think there are other companies asking similar questions and coming to similar types of solutions, and those may well appear as discussion topics at conferences in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. We've seen a little bit of that happening. I think the trend has been a bit more towards having embedded authors and authors working more closely with development teams.
Yeah.
I guess I've forgotten that it was a bit of a struggle for us. It sounds like we just breezed in and said, right, this is how technical writers work. We're going to work on development teams. But for a long time, actually, there were two problems. One was that no one really knew what we did.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that when they did know, they didn't value what we did at all. And so it was a bit of a struggle to constantly sort of put ourselves in front of the senior managers and say, you need us. You need to hire more of us. We need to be more engaged, and we need to be more central to development. We've kind of won that battle now, so the organisation believes that to be true and very much is on our side about the value of good technical writers. But I think for any organisation there is that kind of curve of adoption almost.
So what happened? What caused the change from them not valuing documentation and what the team was doing to them valuing it? Was it just attrition of saying it enough times, or?
So there's two answers probably. The correct answer is that over time the company saw the benefit of having writers work in that way. They saw that the quality of products was much better, and also that the teams themselves started to really sort of benefit from having a technical writer full time.
Yeah.
And also some of the individuals, the characters that we had, I think were really great PR for us, because they were on a team, and some of them basically took over how that team ran, and everything good flowed from them on that team. So they did us a big favour. So I like to say that we sort of we won that argument was it was just the evidence was on our side, but there was also what you said as well, a sort of constant nagging, almost barraging, and getting in people's faces really. You can't be if you're going to be a kind of quiet, retiring sort of author, if who wants to just sit quietly and write, you're probably never going to sort of work in this kind of environment, because you need to participate, you need to get your voice heard as well, and also speak out if a product is being developed that doesn't have a writer. Well, that's a problem, because it's not going to be as good. We know that the interface won't be as intuitive, the right set of user assistance. So we speak up and say everything should go through that process really.
I think you've told me in the past that actually some of the authors became took over the management of the projects, and started steering the project itself. That I can imagine that had a.
It did help as well. I guess mostly because those people had a lot of respect. So we've seen really, really excellent technical writers sort of flourish in the organisation, become more senior, and have more authority, more influence, and that just is another sort of plus point in our favour, that hiring good writers is really important for the long-term future of our organisation, not just because we need good technical writing right now. But if we choose the right people, they can. There's all kinds of things they can do and have done actually.
They should be good communicators.
Yeah.
Not always are, but if they are, then that can help elsewhere.
Yes, exactly. And the mix of skills that we've got with our writers, because we look just as much for the sort of the social interaction side as for the writing side and the technical side. I think it's quite a potent mix, and it makes those people very valuable.
That's the questions I had. Is there any other questions or points? Other stuff that is worth sharing?
I think that is pretty comprehensive. I was trying to think if there's anything we've not particularly talked about. We do try. One of the things I should say is we try and look outside of Redgate as well. So we talk about the ISTC, but we do have a budget for learning and development, and that can be anything. But often it's useful to send some of the writers to various conferences, and we're always looking around. So I think this year we're going to Write the Docs, which we've heard is good, and that will be in Prague. In the past, we've gone to Matthew Ellison's conference, and we've got the ISTC conference. We do. The danger has become a bit insular. We live in a bubble, and so we do want to, see what's outside of Redgate as well.
Well, we do an advanced course, which is always worth considering.
Yeah, we will.
And LavaCon, I think you've asked me about in the past, and I think you've considered going to that, which is in the States, which is well regarded. Thanks very much for your time on this, Brian. This is very useful information.